Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you today. My name is Scott Huxley from Syscom Business Technologies. Together today we have Andy Goldberg. How are you doing today, Andy?
Great. Pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, likewise. Happy to participate in our first webinar. I'm super excited. So we start a little early. What I'm going to do is go ahead and open up our first poll for attendees today. So I'm going to go ahead and we will start with that and leave that open for a little bit as we get ready to make a start. For those that are on the webinar today, Andy, start with a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Scott. Well, first off, again, I want to express a pleasure and thank you for inviting me to join you. I think this panelist discussion is going to be great, interactive, going to learn a ton about website disclosures and cyber risks, which have been in the newspaper a ton lately and keeps populating my LinkedIn feed. Every other article is on cyber risks. My practice is devoted exclusively to businesses that are on a high trajectory growth path, where I'm dealing with entrepreneurial owners who are really focused on establishing solid relationships with their advisors and interested in growing their business. A lot of them are what are commonly referred to as second stage businesses, where their revenue is growing and they really want to take the next step. And I provide a variety of counsel, most recently focused a lot on technology and cyber compliance, website compliance, and those issues. But my practice really involves a full spectrum of business advising, and always love to connect with people. So if you check out my LinkedIn, that's the best place to find me and to interact with me. So check out my LinkedIn and please hit the connect button. And I always accept connections to build relationships. Scott, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Tell us a little bit about your practice and your company.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. Yeah, so for those that are new to me, my name is Scott Huxley, COO of Syscom Business Technologies. Again, very much like Andy, we work with growth focused organizations that are looking to leverage technology and are looking to grow through their use of technology and secure what they have and continue to grow their business. So again, very similar patterns. We have offices in northern Michigan, also Metro Detroit as well. And again, very much like yourself, working with growth-oriented companies who are looking to leverage technology, and understand it. So yeah, again, complete pleasure. Looking forward to delivering as much value as we can for the audience today. So
Scott, real quick question: Is it true that your office up in Traverse City is really there just so you can have a business place to go enjoy the summer weather up in Traverse City?
Maybe. Maybe. It is beautiful. There's no doubt about it. And it was actually our first kind of original opening office. But yeah, it is beautiful in the summertime for those that visit that area. But yes, maybe. I guess the answer is maybe. How does that sound?
There we go. You're giving a lawyer answer. So let's check out the results from our quick poll. If you want to pop them up, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead, close out that, and share the results with everyone today. So there we go. That's the you guys should see the results there for everybody.
Man, we have a lot to live up to, man. 82%.
Yes,
Scott. I mean, it's funny. This is for sure false advertising. If they think 82% think that we're truly awesome, but we hope to fulfill. And I apologize for any delays in Jimmy John's delivery.
Yeah, we've all experienced that, right? And we have a lot to live up to. Yeah, and I think also too, living proof that the payments that we made to people that registered paid off.
Right. All right, let's jump in. Let's jump in.
Let's jump in. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm excited. Let's jump into an area that Andy knows very well, and I'm delighted that we can touch on some points that people are unaware of more than likely. But Andy, let's start a little bit about website disclosures. We've all visited websites. We've all seen the accept this, accept that. But can you talk to us a little bit for the people that are on the call today about this portion, website disclosures?
Yeah, we're going to talk about website disclosures, and the first thing I want to run through is get people's insights on where they are. So I know we have another quick poll that we can pop up. There are 2 in a row. There'll be one more later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Scott,
absolutely.
pop that one up and see how people are thinking about their own website disclosures. So we're going to pause a few minutes on this issue.
Yep. Yeah, and why we push that out to people, let them kind of think on that a little bit. Again, I just want to reiterate, we've all visited them, and they've changed a lot over the years. It'll be interesting to see what people think about it. I suspect that it's a topic that people haven't really put a lot into. You know, I think when a website gets done, it seems very static. It's created and that's it. So I don't know if people think too deeply about it. So it'll be interesting to see what feedback we receive.
Right, and I think it's also true that really some of these, how people answer will depend on, like you said, if it's a static website or if it's an e-commerce website, or if they're actually collecting information. Some people, their website is nothing more than a firm brochure that's on the site, and some are actually really getting first and last name and email addresses, which is a completely different story, even if they're not selling goods.
Yeah, I think people don't think about it too much once the website's up. And I think the interesting thing, and not to kind of steal your thunder a little bit, but I think as we think about other countries that we do business with too, you know, not to steal a thunder on the other content that we have for the audience today, but it'd be interesting to see what people really think about in terms of this particular topic.
All right, let's see what results we have from this.
All right, okay, let's go ahead and close this one out and share with everyone. And there we go. I think the overwhelming result there about, yeah, it was pretty close, but the winner there, 38% of the just believing that the website company or designer or firm just handles that.
Yeah, that's you know what, actually, Scott, from my experience, that's not surprising at all. Honestly, one of the reasons is simply because they don't have a person dedicated inside the company to handle these issues. Frankly, it's just entrepreneurial companies are focused so much on sales, driving revenue, and just shipping product or services that this gets put on the back burner. So let's jump right in to our deck and hit the first slide. So let's talk about why we should even care about website disclosures. So there's really, in my opinion, 6 main reasons. First, it's simply good business sense. As we saw, people expect it now. That goes with the good business sense. It's the right thing to do. It's part of your branding. It's part of the appearance of the professionalism of your firm, and it's the law in a lot of cases. Second, that I focus on is your clients expect it. Every single site has website disclosures. If yours doesn't, then it's going to be a little bit different, and going to be not up to par. Third is state and federal laws require it. There's a whole plethora of not just federal laws, but states, sometimes 50 different states that govern the disclosures. Next, it can act as a defense against claims from vendors and customers if you ship bad product or services. Next, almost all websites were built to collect information. Even if you don't think it does, when it was developed, the back end probably collects information. And next, it can be really expensive if you don't, because of the fines and levied by federal agencies and states. So you already have my next slide up, Scott, so I'm going to jump right into what does personally identifiable information mean and why is it important. So PII, which is how I'll refer to it, is really, it focuses a lot on the full name, home address, country, state, email address, social security number, any data that can be used to identify a specific individual. A lot of cases, it's social security number, passport number, a driver's license, credit card numbers, particularly telephone numbers. And there's a whole other. But I think what's important in a lot of cases is when email sign-up lists, for instance, go out there and they ask for a first and last name and a web address. Boom, you have personally identifiable information. So now you are you have to comply with all this all the requirements on protecting this. If you're an e-commerce site and obviously you're collecting credit cards, boom, you've got a PII. If you're doing any sort of tracking, rightly or wrongly, on IP addresses, login details, cookies, you have personally identifiable information. So that is, you are required to have comply with these PII laws. So I would really say that whether, again, it goes back to what I mentioned in the first slide, whether you think you do or you don't, you probably do, and you should have a privacy policy, if nothing more than to protect yourself. Scott, let's talk about now on the next slide, when do we need it and what should be in it? If you can flip over to the next slide.
Yeah, it should have changed there for you.
Okay, mine says, what does PII mean anyway, and why is it important? So here's our technical glitch. We apologize. Why do we need it and what should be in it? So there's no single federal law that controls personally identifiable information. That means there's a patchwork of over 14 state laws, federal regulations, executive branch announcements, and more that govern the collection and usage of PII. There's the U.S. Privacy Act. There's Health Insurance and Portability Act, HIPAA, Graham-Leach-Bliley, Children's Online Privacy Protection, the Federal Trade Commission, Americans with Disability Act, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It goes on that govern your privacy. And then, as I mentioned before, there are state laws which govern privacy as well. So let's talk about what a good privacy policy discloses and covers. It covers what information you're collecting from customers and other members of the public. And when I say customers, visitors to your site, it talks about how it collects the information. So it might be downloaded information if you're collecting login information. It talks about how it stores and protects this information, how it uses the information. I think this is a critical aspect because originally, going back in the wild, wild west days, people were using the information, selling it to third-party marketing companies, sharing it with other co-vendors, and you really had no control. That's really kind of gone by the wayside. And it also talks about how customers have access to information that's collected about them. So you can have some say into what's there. One of the things that I want to talk about in the privacy policy is that don't just cut and paste from what somebody else wrote. It has to accurately reflect what it is. So you have to say what you do and do what you say. It should be written with clear, concise language that average consumers will understand, and it should be regularly reviewed. Scott, I don't. Our slides are kind of, or my slides are going crazy. Are you good on your end?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. See, mine's paused on my side, so there we go.
Okay, mine's talking about cookies, so maybe we can go back a slide.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
Yep.
So they should be regularly reviewed. Here's the most important part. The FTC clearly will fine you if you have misleading statements about your privacy policy. So if you say you do or don't collect, then do what you say. Or if you say you don't share but you do, you're going to suffer hefty fines from the Federal Trade Commission. So I think it's crucially important that you have that you follow what you're doing in this capacity. Scott, have you, in some of your cyber risk stuff, have you confronted any of these issues on the privacy?
No, I think not so much on the website. I think what we've experienced a lot on our side has been really the kind of cyber risk associated to a website.
Okay.
More so than the disclosures. I think to your comment earlier about the feedback on the poll, a lot of people just assume that the web person's handling it. I guess you would know better than I from a legal perspective. It's not much of a defense, right, to say, well, is that a legal defense? My web guy was handling it, so you need to. So we have experienced it with websites. I think that websites have kind of pivoted away from a lot of companies just being a brochure website to being something more fully functional, where people can order product and people can interact with a company through the website. So not so much on the disclosure side, but I can say, some of the organizations that I've worked with personally over the years, to your early point about HIPAA and things like that, it's very clear really what your obligations are.
Okay.
It's already laid out for you.
Let's move on to our next slide. And
yeah.
All right, we're talking about cookies here, and not the kind that you eat. So I'm bringing this up because it's been rampant. Every website you go to now has a pop-up about cookies. Yep. So let's talk about, there are 3 types. They're called session cookies. And this is the type where you might be on your Amazon website and you flip back and forth about what's being loaded into your cart, or you put in some information just for that session. So it'll keep it in place until you leave the website or until you log off that site. Then there are permanent cookies. A lot of this times could be your login information or even credit card information that stays in there and is the company can pull it up every time you come back to them. And then there are what are called third-party cookies, and these are installed by third parties, a lot of times advertisers that hope to learn. Like, it's crazy that when I go on the website, I'll see the same ads, or if I'm searching a website, then all of a sudden ads pop up that relate to the website. I know they're annoying, but it's really important to a well-functioning website. So why are these warnings and consent issues popping up now? It's primarily due to, and we'll discuss this later, GDPR. And this is privacy legislation from Europe that requires websites to get consent from visitors to store or retrieve information. And you're saying to me, Andy, it's Europe. Why do I have to comply with this? Well, your website doesn't know who's visiting it. It doesn't have a wall that says, oh, if I get a visitor from England, I'm not going to give them access to my website. That's the reason. And so the next question is, Andy, I really don't care. You know what? So let the European Union come after me. I don't have any assets over there. I don't have a bank account over there. What are they going to get from me? Not so fast, my friend. Here's the issue, that the United States and Europe actually share a lot of information and have legal enforcement arrangements where the US will enforce GDPR and the EU will enforce the United States legislation. So you are going to be subject to these laws, even if you don't sell to to the EU, you don't have assets there. And that is why it's really important to have these cookie announcements, I should say, pop up on your screen. That's I would say the best example. So if you don't have it, it's one thing that I think you should strongly consider. Unless, of course, you're going to actually block people from Europe, which I'm not the tech side, and Scott may know a little bit more about that. If you can actually block people from Europe accessing your website, that's something that's possible.
I've seen it. It's not common, but it's definitely doable. I think to your earlier comment about just having a robust policy in place, you're probably better served just by having a robust policy in place that just addresses it, rather than trying to block the rest of to block Europe, because we often interact with people in different countries, and obviously we live in a very interconnected world these days. It would be a little a little bit ridiculous, I think, to try and block European countries, but it is doable from a technical point for sure.
Okay, let's go on. Let's move on to our next topic. I think the next slide probably was covered in the cookies.
Yeah. So this one is
slide, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely.
So privacy policies. So we talked a lot about them and having them, and we don't need to reiterate it here. I'm not sure honestly how this is in it. Are you going in the right direction, Scott?
Yes. Yep.
Hit the next policy. Terms of service. Okay, here we go. I love this one. Terms of service. If you are selling anything on your website, you need this. Again, like the privacy policy and cookies, you should absolutely have a terms of service or terms of use, even if you don't think you need it. This is used to protect copyright information. It's used to dictate how disputes are resolved with a customer and other procedures and processes for working with your website. It can even be used as a way to prevent people from coming back to your website if they're abusing it with comments they're leaving, or a lot of times where there's a social media platform, if they're abusing the use of the social media site. Obviously the best one is Twitter barred President Trump from using that. Now, you may not have a Twitter platform, but you definitely will have people coming to visit, and they may comment or they may use your website with login information. So you should have the terms of service. Scott, let's go on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this area. So we're talking about selling product on our website, and this is really where the terms of service can really help. There are really probably 8 areas if you're in e-commerce that you should have. First is a limitation of liability and disclaimer of warranty, which we're going to talk a little bit more. Rules for user conduct on the website, how they can use it, what they can order from it, how they have to check out, how they can access it. If you have creative work on the website, or you have information that is really attributable to another person, you have to have copyright disclosures and prevent people from accessing and using your copyrightable material. You're going to want that on your website. Next, a couple details that I think are really crucial. I call it jurisdiction information for any disputes. If you're selling things on your website, or maybe your paper contracts refer back to your website for more terms and conditions, you're going to want to state exactly where any lawsuit would be handled or whether it would be handled by arbitration. And that is a critical issue. Contact details. How do you get a hold of somebody? This is the bane of my existence. Too many times, at least for me, I can only get a hold of companies through email. Me personally, I like phone numbers. I'm still a big believer in human contact, not just chat contact in the lower right-hand corner or just email. But you're going to want how to resolve issues. So you're going to want contacts information. You're going to want to have clauses that describe your rights if they're contesting a billing or a charge or the quality of information. So those would be items that should be on there as well. What's really crucial, and I tell all my clients, is that a link to these terms of use have to be conspicuous. Too often I see them in the bottom footer of a website, and you can barely even read or find the link to the terms of use. Make it obvious. If you're selling things, put it right in the checkout. If people are signing up for your website, put it right at the same spot where they're signing up for your website, for your newsletter. Those are all really important places that this should show up. Scott, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, you
So
bring up a
just
good point. You bring up a good point actually about making it visible so many times. Those things which are very important we're talking about today. Good comment about the uh, which state, for example, for arbitration purposes or something like that. That those are things often people don't think about. But yeah, a lot of times those things are buried. To your point.
right. So this section on liability waiver and disclaimer of warranty terms, I think is the most important section. And while I hope you take a lot out of this, I hope this is the most important, or this should be the most important on your list. Primarily, you don't want to sell a product, let's say that's $100, and get sued and have to pay $10,000 in damages. So a limitation of liability usually tells the buyer or even any user of your website the maximum amount that they could recover from either buying a product or even their relationship with you, even if it's an offline relationship. Again, assuming that those contracts refer back to your website. So you always want to minimize your risk exposure. Then the counterpart to that, and what really goes with it, is a disclaimer of warranty terms. And this, we find, it says, we're not going to make, you've seen the big bold print in all caps. It says, I make no warranties whatsoever. And while they're annoying, they do serve a purpose. Otherwise, of course, they wouldn't be in there. And they basically tell the buyer that, look it, you're buying from me and you have to trust that the products are good. And I'm sorry, while I do a really good job, that if this doesn't fit into exactly the purpose you serve, or there might be a slight glitch, that don't come back to us because we breached a warranty. And even, by the way, if you do come back to us, our obligation is limited under the limitation of liability clause. And that clause might say, my only obligation is to refund your money or to fix the product or to buy a replacement for you. So those two sections really work together and are crucial for anybody who either sells online or sells offline, but has I'll call it their boilerplate T's and C's set up on their website for customers to refer back to and that are part of the contract. Scott, let's go on to the next slide, see what we got going on. Website, HIPAA website compliant. So this is crucial. And if you think the penalties for violating privacy can be steep, just wait if you are collecting personal health information. And this is generally identified as demographic or genetic information related to health, related to a past, present, or future physical or mental health condition of an individual, and it's held or maintained by you or a business associate for that purpose. Importantly, it also applies if you're transmitting this information. So it's not just doctors' offices or hospitals, but it can also be those companies that may be cloud service providers or third-party service providers who are transmitting this information. It can even apply to email service providers who help doctors' offices. These email service providers have to have HIPAA compliance. So this is crucially important for you. You might get PHI through a contact form, an online patient form, a live chat, patient portal, any of that information that you'll be collecting. What's super interesting, I think, is that with the advent of online training and virtual training, since all the gyms were shut down, I see a lot of these gyms collecting a lot of information about a person. Have they ever experienced back pain? Do they have a specific health issue? All that, unbeknownst to them, is PHI. And now all of a sudden, they're going to be subject to HIPAA because it's going to be associated with an account that has their name on it. And I think there's so many ways that they can go awry or not know that they're collecting PHI and not know that they have to comply with HIPAA regulations. And then finally, if you're a software vendor, you're going to have HIPAA compliance too. If you have doctors that are patients and they're transmitting data over your software. All right, Scott, let's move on.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you bring up a good point about that as we move to the next slide, because that also touches on the technology as well. So HIPAA is quite a broad, it's quite a broad gambit.
So I'm going to cover this slide and the next slide in one. Special laws in California and Europe. And if I say, oh, well, of course they got special laws in California.
But Andy, I'm in Michigan. But Andy, I'm in Michigan. What's California got to do with me?
Great question. It's really the same idea that we talked about with Europe. You don't know where your visitors are coming from.
Yeah,
you don't know that a visitor from California is coming from you. And even more importantly, I have a number of clients here locally that do business with individuals and businesses in Europe, in California. They could be, let's talk about the virtual exercise, or a coaching client, or you may have a marketing client out there. It could be anything. Scott, you may have a company that you're doing some cyber work for out there. All of those have specific laws related to protecting the information of their citizens. Again, GDPR and California. And some of this information is really what we talked about, but the real point of this is to bring it up again and to stress the importance about where your obligations lie. Your obligations don't lie, unfortunately, just with the state of Michigan. If you're doing business in those other states, you're going to be pulled in. And just like California wants, or Michigan would want California to enforce a specific law, Michigan may help California enforce that law too, in some cases.
Yeah, true.
I think I would point out one thing. Some people may say, well, hey, Andy, I heard GDPR only applies to companies with more than 250 employees. That's not untrue. So I'm going to acknowledge that. But I think what's happening is once you start to go down the rabbit hole of protecting privacy, PII, it's really these providers and these website services and even consultants doing GDPR is just part of the package. It's hard to splice and dice what you're going to comply with or not. So I would say to you, yeah, you're likely just going to end up complying with GDPR, which is a good thing anyway, even if you don't necessarily technically have to comply with it because you have under 250 employees, or maybe you do have more than 250 employees. So that's where I would think about that. And then California as well. There's actually special consulting companies that are helping websites comply with the California law that was recently came into effect at the beginning of this year. So again, take a look at this. Your website developer may or may not know all these things. I've had literally one in my lifetime, one website developer come to me and say, Andy, what do I need to comply with all these laws? And we went through them. And we actually brought in some third-party vendors for some specific issues. So don't rely on your website vendor alone. Scott, do we have?
Yeah, I think you said you were going to kind of cover two in one.
There we go. So we can go on to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is Scott's portion of the webinar, and why don't we crank up the poll for your section, Scott, and we'll move along and we'll have some discussion about cyber risks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, while Scott's poll is up, if there are questions or things you want us to specifically address, crank them in the chat box and we'll get them right at the end of the webinar.
Yeah, well, I wait for that poll to be pushed out to people. Work from home. No, not WTF. Very true. Work from home really took off last year for obvious reasons with COVID and things like that. But it's become a reality for a lot of people, and a lot of companies still are not back in the office. Some of them, they are mostly remotely. By that I mean, 90% or more, and some that are kind of conducting a slow return. So So work from home, which has always been something that's been available to people. It's not new, but it came to the fore out of necessity, I think, more than anything else. Became a big deal in 2020. Remains a big item on people's list in 2021 as people still continue to work from home. And
Scott, I have a question. Let's jump out of the quick poll. Let's see what we got. And I also have a question on work from home for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and close this one out and see what we got. Be interested to see what winners we have. And the winner is kind of limiting access to the people, or having access to the people that really need it. That's one thing you can do, but the truth is that I guess the correct answer is there's a multitude of different ways in which we can help protect those. But yeah, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, one of the questions that I'm really interested in is when you're work from home and people are connecting maybe through their Comcast or AT&T and they're not connecting, and then they may go to the cloud for software, versus when they were working in the office, they may have had a server inside the office. Can you talk to me a little bit about the security and those issues related to those specific different circumstances, if you will?
Yeah. So in simple terms, every organization is invested in its infrastructure significantly over the course of the last 10 years, decade. A lot of those infrastructure things that businesses invested in, secure firewalls and all these other things that companies did, a lot of it goes out the door when I'm working at home behind my Comcast connection, to your point. So the common, I guess, fallacy that I hear repeated a lot is, well, I'm in the cloud, so I'm good. So maybe you do have a server, maybe you don't, I don't know. Maybe you connect into your work server. I have no idea, every business is different. But the biggest fallacy is, I'm in the cloud, so I'm good. So the topic of work from home means that we've got employees sitting at home behind their Comcast box, performing work, and it's a risk for sure, because again, those critical infrastructure investments that business owners have made over the course of the last 10 years are largely out the window, because I'm at home, I have my personal laptop potentially, or work provided laptop, and I'm just connecting either through my Comcast box or $150 device I got from Best Buy. That's nothing like what the infrastructure that business owners invested in over the last 10 years. So it is a risk for sure.
Yeah.
And just being in the cloud, by the way, does not mean that you're safe and secure, despite what people tell you. Even the people that are selling the software that would love you to believe that you're good. You can always be better. Phishing emails. This is something that goes hand in hand in many ways with work from home. A lot of people move to platforms such as Teams and Zoom and SharePoint and Google Drive and all those things to share things with you, because now I'm not in the office with Andy. I have to share things with you in a collaborative way, and that might be through Google, it might be through Microsoft, it doesn't really matter, it could be Dropbox. But what sits behind that is the reality of life, that phishing continues to climb. So I pulled some, as we put together the webinar, I pulled some, I thought interesting industry stats, and Microsoft reports the fact that there's about 300 million fraudulent attempts to access its services every day, not a month, not a quarter, every day. There's 300 million attempts to fraudulently access Microsoft services. So there's a definite risk there. And with work from home, that created opportunity through things like COVID emails, things like that, for the users to be put in potentially harm's way by a document that you think's legitimate actually is not. So it remains a big risk, and it goes hand in hand with work from home. So my advice to people that are on the webinar today is seek out employee training or for everybody, not a once a quarter, not a twice a year type thing, but ongoing, audit. There's tools out there that allow you to automate that. And some of the industry numbers indicate, as many as about 85% of organizations have experienced some sort of phishing attempt. And I think that's legitimate. And I think actually that might be a little low. I think it might be higher than that. So for those that are on the webinar today, invest in training your users, because despite all the investments that we make, that's a critical piece.
Yeah, Scott, I've been when I say a victim, I've been an attempted victim or a target of these phishing emails. And really what I've learned is, if I'm not expecting the attachment, because most of the time it involves clicking on a link or an attachment, I actually turn around and not hit reply, but I send a different email to the person, say, did you send me an email with an attachment? Because what I've learned is, if you just hit reply, these phishing emails, these bots, or I'm not sophisticated enough to know the technical term, but they've actually put something in there. So if you hit reply and say, did you send this to me? There's an automatic response that says, yes, Andy, I sent this to you, open it. And that's not even coming from the person who sent it to you. That was coming from the company that was doing the phishing attack. So they're that sophisticated that they're anticipating a response. So I'll send a different email and ask them if they, not just hit reply, and ask them if they sent me. And that's the one way I've really tried to combat it. And I tell my people in my office, if you weren't expecting an attachment, you don't open it. Or if you don't recognize the domain name, don't open it.
Yeah, and there's things that business owners can do to kind of reduce some of that risk, that they can invest in, advanced email filtering and things like that, and something a little bit later that we'll learn here towards the end, which is two-factor. But all those things will help reduce the attack surface. But no, you bring up a very good point, which is the criminals continue to up the game. So what we did, 3-4 years ago, it's probably not good enough today. It really isn't, because criminals are using automation themselves, and there's so much information out there, so much data, that if I wanted to find your telephone number and email and whatever else, I could find it in seconds. It would take no time at all. And of course, criminals do that at scale because they automate that. They don't have to manually do it. So phishing remains a huge risk. Something without getting too technical, something called spear phishing, which is if I want to target Andrew, someone does a little bit of due diligence and ensures that Andrew is the business owner and things like that. Those have a very high percentage of success typically too. So anything we can do to help our users should be investigated and seized upon for sure. And work from home has helped that. There's no doubt about it. I included these because these are very pertinent. So these are some examples of phishing emails you see. This is a common one here, which is, hey, you need to log into your Office, your Microsoft account. You need to reset your password. I've said this to numerous people over the years. I always find it fascinating that criminals use security sometimes as a means to steal your data. So Andy might get an email that says, hey, we've noticed some suspicious activity on your account. Great reverse psychology, by the way. We've noticed some suspicious activity on your account. We need you to log into a page that resembles this to reset your credentials. And of course, they take your information, they take your username, they take your password, and then they go ahead and use it. So this is a good one, because what they do is they clone the page to look identical to Microsoft. So that continues to be a challenge. And then with the advent of technology, another one I personally like is this one, which is the voicemail. Now, so many businesses have and this also speaks to, I think, how criminals have developed over the years, that your adversary isn't a static individual that's trying the same thing all the time. No, they are. There's a lot of money in it, and they're consistently upping their game. This one's a great one. I like this as an example because so many businesses, Andy, have a voice over IP phone system of some sort, either through, say, a Comcast or maybe with someone that you purchased a system from to replace an old one. So now getting a voice to email message in your email, Andy, isn't new anymore. It happens all the time. So they've gotten pretty clever at spoofing those messages to say, hey, hey, Andy, you have one new voicemail to check. You're like, oh, that's weird. So you go ahead and check it. And of course, that's when all the bad stuff happens. So just a reminder for those on the call today that criminals do continue to craft a better game, if you will. And they keep their phishing attempts pertinent and relevant to today, right?
I've been guilty of receiving these as well. So I'm just I must just look like a sucker for these types of attacks.
Yeah, I think many people on the call have probably seen something like the first two that we went through, and there's more. But I picked the two because I just think it just kind of speaks to the fact that they are very clever in what they do, and they're always upping the game. Another one I talk a lot about with people is stolen credentials. And at the bottom of the slide there, you'll see my email there. If anybody wants me to run a report and send it over to them, I'll be happy to do that. So many businesses that I chat with, Andy, have no idea what information about their business is out there. And it's certainly not monitored. I think it's safe to say that. Even on a very basic form, as a consumer of, say, credit cards, a lot of the credit card companies now, hopefully, people on the call are familiar with, hey, you would notice this breach or this information has been leaked or something like that. But on a business level, very little is done with it. So I always encourage people to explore and know what information about your organization is out there. So for those that have attended the webinar today, if you want to shoot me an email, I'll be happy to run a report, just send that over to you. No strings attached, if you will. I'll just send it to you so that you can see it. It's important, and the reason it's so important, Andy, today is because we like to use the same passwords. That if your information gets captured in one arena, Andy, it could very easily impact other arenas of your business and personal life.
Yeah, Scott, I want to jump in here and raise a couple of questions about stolen credentials and data breaches. There are a couple major factors here that we should all be thinking of. First is I've been involved helping companies respond to data breaches, and there are very state-specific laws about what you're required to do and how you're required to respond. So it's not just the breach itself, but it's the response activity, whether you have to notify each person, or if you don't even notify whose data was breached, you might just have to notify everyone. So that's the legal side. So that's one element. Number two is the god-awful PR nightmare when it shows up that your data was breached and it was stolen. And I think that you might say, no big deal, but I think that this idea of data breach is turning into another way of, do I trust this vendor or do I trust this company to do business with if they can't even have their own IT systems in place to protect their own data, let alone anything they gather from me. So I think that there's a huge PR factor here. And finally, we have seen for specific circumstances where companies have literally been shut down because of a data breach, whether there was where there was a ransomware attack, or where so much data was stolen that the company lost significant value in the marketplace. And all of a sudden, a company worth $30 million is now literally worth $10 million because people pulled their contracts, they stopped doing work for them. All of a sudden, their bank loans are called. These things are trickle-down nightmares for companies.
Yeah, it is very real. And also too, I want the people on the webinar today to think about, like, if for example, me and Andy, we know each other pretty well. I hope he trusts emails from me. But if I was to be breached through some stolen credentials, Andy's likely to receive an email from me, from someone that he trusts, and that creates challenges. So stolen credentials, first of all, aren't pointing time. Please understand that a data breach that happened to you a year ago could impact your organization in 12 months' time in other ways, because so many times people kind of negate the impacts of it. And I want people to think about, if Andy's information is compromised or mine, how that impacts the people that we interact with, because it's all very relevant, and it's not so it's not so singular focused. It has an impact in other arenas for sure. So again, for anyone that's on the call, if they want to send me a request or an email, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to send that information over so you can at least understand and then adjust accordingly. TwoFactor as we get towards the end here. Huge deal. Full disclosure, seeing as it's in the title of the webinar. Security is a pain in the butt, right, Andy? Security is annoying. It is. Yeah. It's annoying. We hate it. We hate it. But we have to choose our worse.
The alternative can be
worse. The alternative is definitely worse. Yes. So I wanted to put this in and share it with people on the call today. TwoFactor is mentioned a lot. Often available, but not turned on, which is weird in a lot of cases. If you're a CPA, a lot of times the software that you're using enforces it. But TwoFactor, again, from industry numbers I've read, researchers suggest that just having TwoFactor set up can reduce the amount of fraudulent logins by as much as 99.9%. Truth is, TwoFactor makes it much harder for criminals to access things like email. You can set up TwoFactor for your email so that that code has to be entered to log in. And TwoFactor as a whole can be used for a lot of different things in our lives, anything from banking, if they have it available, to other items that we use in business. It's annoying, yes, because it means you've got to put the stupid code in every time you want to go do something, but it is a great way to reduce, like it says here, unauthorized access, because that's really what we're trying to do. And when I'm sitting down and talking to people, in my mind, we've moved as a technology provider, which I mentioned at the start of webinars, which is what we do. That's a small part of what we do. We're always going to fix things that are broke. We're always going to fix a printer that doesn't print or something that doesn't work. But the value really is helping you protect the data that you have, so it retains in your possession. And TwoFactor is a great way to do it. There are password programs, by the way, that kind of consolidate your passwords. There's things like LastPass and a few other things that are out there. OnePass is another one, and some of them also actually will populate the TwoFactor code for you. So my observation on this for everyone on the call is consider it, understand its relevance and helping protect your users, and document how it exists in the company. It doesn't help if I'm a CPA firm, Andy, and I've got TwoFactor set up for my Thomson Reuters software, but I don't have TwoFactor set up for my email. Well, then there's a problem that needs to be addressed. So I urge people to explore it, and then I urge people to make sure that it's consistently deployed across the organization and get people's buy-in. I think one of the critical things here, Andy, today is you need buy-in from people on these things. You need buy-in from leaders in your company, CEOs and owners of companies to make these investments to help protect your data, because one day you'll come in and frankly, that data won't be there, it'll be gone. So, yeah. And by the way, yes.
Real quick, I know we're at we're about 5 to 10 minutes to 1. If people jump off, this is recorded so you can catch the end, but if you jump off, you're going to get a survey that pops up that we'd really like you to take and complete. So that's just a heads up if you have to leave, but Scott and I are going to continue and we're going to answer questions at the end. So Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you'll be prompted with a survey there towards the end. We encourage you to fill that out. I will pay extra for people that rate my presentation a little better than Andy's, but just send me your address. Venmo or PayPal should be fine. And my last comment really on the two-factor piece is it sounds ironic, but set up two-factor on your password program. If you are using a password program, and hopefully you're using unique passwords, but if you are using some sort of password program, think about the security that program should have too, because if you're doing that, then you have a program that kind of has the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. So if you don't have a program right now, explore one that at least has that ability to help protect your information for sure. So I think with that, let's go to questions. I had one question.
Scott, did you have do we have a slide? I don't know if we have a slide on cyber liability that I wanted to jump to.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go. Yep.
Yeah, I know you had some thoughts, but this is like a couple of items where I talked about the limitation of liability and disclaimer of warranty. This is another area where I have a particular passion, oddly enough, right? You can make fun of me offline, but I can't tell you the number of cyber liability insurance policies that I've reviewed for clients that really don't cover what you think they would cover. I'll give you a couple real quick examples. One is if data is stolen from somebody who works for you. In other words, it was an inside hack, if you will, or an inside breach of your system. Your policy might not cover it. And Scott, I don't know the percentage of breaches that actually start inside as opposed to are actually external. I don't know if there's data on that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, and I should have pulled them.
That's okay. I don't expect you to have all this data at your fingertips, but suffice to say, I've been involved in a couple instances where we've actually had data breaches inside, and then there's been a release of confidential information. So that's one. The other area on this is, let's say that you now have to buy credit protection coverage from Experian or TransUnion or any of the credit reporting bureaus. Does your insurance cover that? That's another area. Does it cover for public relations expenses? Because God knows you're going to have them in dealing with newspapers, TV reporters, whomever it may be. So I think your liability insurance policy is really important that you review it carefully and you don't just leave it to a simple rider to your policy, and you take a strong look at it. I would say I'm going to add one final element to this, is that even if you have a cyber liability insurance, the underwriter is going to do an evaluation of your own security system, because they're not going to want to insure a company that's not taking any precautions itself. So you may be forced to call Scott in anyway, or myself, just to get your insurance policy or to get a premium that is manageable for you to look at. Scott, I'll leave it there, and if you want to touch a little bit more on this topic or anything else, go for it.
So you mean insurance companies just don't want to just pay out? That's almost unheard of right now.
That's true with that. No matter what insurance, whatever they're insuring, your car, your house, your IT systems.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yes. No, you make some really good, valid points. My experience, Andy, with this has been people are often, I would say, a good 70% of people, it could be higher, are underinsured. We ask this question ourselves through the part of the process that we have, but a lot of times companies are terribly underinsured. Just like at the start of the webinar, there's a web guy that handles the disclosures. Usually the answer that we come across on cyber, Andy, is our insurance person takes care of that. And in a lot of cases, sadly, they do only have a rider. They only have a small policy that It sounds like you've read through a few over the years, but where the limits are so low that you've gone through your limits in no time, and are still left with a six-figure bill on your hands because your rider policy only covered a tiny portion of what you needed. It didn't cover everything. So that's been my observation, and it continues to be so this year as it was last. So yeah, don't take anything for granted. I guess if you walk away with one thing from today's webinar is, if it's not documented, then it's not happening. And if you're just assuming that your web person's handling it, if you're assuming that your insurance person is handling it for you, and I hate to say it, but even if you think your IT company is handling it for you, yeah, you need to go do your due diligence and make sure, and they need to provide some sort of documentation to that fact, because as far as I'm concerned, if it's not documented, it's just not happening, and generally it's not happening. Doesn't exist.
Scott, we're hit the 1 o'clock hour. I don't know if there are any questions that came up in the chat. I've got a couple questions that some people chimed in with. Is there anything on your end?
Yeah, I have one question here from Jennifer. So for those that, out of people's time, feel free to leave at this point. If you want to get some more information from the questions, please stay on. As you exit, there'll be the survey. We encourage you to fill that out. It'd be great to hear everyone's feedback today. And also too, you'll receive the recording and a handout of what we went through today. So Jennifer had a question about cyber insurance in terms of, are there any companies that are dedicated just to cyber for insurance?
So there are, I know definitely in town, there are agents. I work with a colleague who does nothing but cyber insurance, and he actually has a certification in cyber liability insurance right in town.
Cool.
So really what they would often do, and they'll go out to the different underwriters, because there are a lot of the insurance companies they all have some various of a cyber liability insurance. But most of the time you're dealing with your agent or underwriter, and they could be representing a number of different insurance companies, whether it's Fireman's Fund or Farmers or Pure Insurance or Chubb. They all have different types of cyber insurance. One of the things that we actually look at when we're picking a policy is what their payout ratio is. So it's not just the health, but how often do they pay on a claim? Because you want to know that they're going to pay out. And when I say pay out, I don't mean that they're going to pay what you ask, but there are definitely some insurance companies that will try and avoid paying. Most will. But the idea is to find a higher payout ratio than those obviously with the lower payout ratio. That's one area. And number two is really when they will come in, what the reporting requirements. So I had a situation where we had a data breach, but interestingly enough, we did not have to make any report to the state because of the circumstances. But we decided to report it to our insurance carrier just in case, as a preventive measure, because in most insurance policies, you're obligated to report a possibility of a claim as soon as you become aware of it. Well, are you going to get penalized for just reporting that as opposed to an actual claim itself or a payout? So Jennifer, it goes to the point of each insurance carrier will have different types of policies. I mean, Lloyd's of London will have a policy. There'll be any number of companies. So your agent should really be able. But I would focus again. This is not just your agent that does your business casualty. I would definitely talk to somebody who has an expertise in cyber risk to get the best policy.
Very cool. Great insight, particularly on the payout, which I haven't heard before. So that was good to hear. And you had some questions too, Andrew.
Yes,
what questions did you have?
I had a question, and this came from a colleague, and this really goes a little bit to social media, right? So if a lot of you are on social media, and some people are actually are influencers or get paid when they make a recommendation, and this actually happens to me. I'll post a lot on LinkedIn, and I'll talk about a book or something, and I actually put in there not sponsored. so people know that I'm not advertising for it. Because if you mention a book, there are a lot of cases where if you are mentioning a book, a product, and you don't put not sponsored, it's presumed that you're being paid for it. And then the flip side of that is if you don't disclose that you're being paid, you've violated some FTC laws. So that's a little bit on the social media side. So if those of you who are lucky enough that have products and people coming after you, that's one way. Or honestly, if there's a referral marketing, how many times do you see people blogging and they say, hey, click here, and it jumps to a product they're talking about? That's a referral marketing link. And if they're getting some fee for it, they should be disclosing that. Scott, the other item that I was asked about is, look, there are a lot of companies that may have anywhere from 1 to 10 million in sales, let's say up to 1 to 25 million. Are there 1 or 2 or maybe 3 real the low-hanging fruit that they can take care of that will have a big impact but won't bust their budget? Do you have any recommendations for those clients? That I get that question often.
On the cyber liability side?
Yeah, the cybersecurity. Yeah, a couple low-hanging fruit items.
Yeah, not so much in terms of recommendations on certainly, I guess, individual agents, but to your point earlier.
I'm talking about like whether it's 2FA or other, how you protect credentials, tactics that they can take to.
Yeah, I guess let's just address the simple ones. So my advice on that is unique passwords. It's a pain in the butt. I get it. But unique passwords, which ties into a password manager. Most businesses should be using some form of password management because you don't want the users using the same passwords across multiple things. Two-factor we've already touched upon. So I would label it, Andy, basically in 3 different veins. Unique passwords, use a password manager. Two-factor, which might also tie back to a password management program of some form. And then finally, and maybe should go first, but would be train your users. Train your users and look at the results. You know, the days of just saying to Andy, hey, look at this email, look at what not to click and don't do that. That's not good enough anymore. So it should probably go first, and it's my third and I guess final suggestion is train your users. Train your users, fish them through your own company resources, if you will. There's lots of tools that allow you to do that, or work with your IT company, IT department, and then look at the results. Look at the results of who clicked on what, and use it as an education opportunity, because it doesn't kind of matter how much you throw. You can reduce your attack surface by making investments like this, both paid and some that are simple changes. But train your users, because at the end of the day, your users in 2021 remain the weakest point of your security stack. So train them, and then look at the results. Look at people that did click on those links. Look at the people that did open those emails, that did submit information. And we've had CEOs of companies, Andy, that we fish ourselves through part of what we do, submit information. Actual owners of businesses submit information. So use it as an opportunity to educate, but monitor it as well.
Awesome. Scott, it's been a pleasure joining you. I think this concludes the webinar. I know we ran over. We thank all of you who stuck around. We hope we gave you a few kernels, and you'll get this deck, and you have our emails and phone numbers that are on the bottom of each slide. And we look forward to chatting with you. And please feel free to reach out to either or both of us with any questions. Scott?
Yep.
Amazing day, and I hope all our participants have an amazing day and enjoy. If you're from Detroit, it's 80 degrees here today, so get out, play hooky, leave work early, and go enjoy the weather, because it's supposed to be 50. It's supposed to be 50 degrees again next week.
With Andy's permission, and he's an attorney, so if something happens, you have his information if there's an issue.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, guys, it's been a pleasure. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.